Put your hand flat against your bedroom ceiling on a hot afternoon. Not near a vent, not near a light fixture, just the plain drywall in the middle of the room. If it feels warm, you are feeling a design failure that has nothing to do with your air conditioner and everything to do with a decision that was made about your attic before you ever bought the house. Here's the number that matters, and it's the one almost nobody explains correctly. In a vented attic in summer, most of the heat crossing that airspace arrives as radiation. Not hot air moving around, not heat soaking slowly through solid wood, radiation. Invisible infrared energy leaving the underside of your shingles and traveling in a straight line down onto whatever is below it. The same way sunlight crosses 93 million miles of empty space to warm your skin. Building science researchers have measured this share at well over 70% of total attic heat gain in a lot of homes, sometimes higher. Your attic insulation, the pink fiberglass bats, or the loose, blown-in cellulose sitting on the attic floor, was never built to stop that. It was built to slow down a completely different kind of heat movement, and it does that job fine. It just isn't the job that's cooking your ceiling. Before I go further, I want to be straight with you about a number you're going to hear a lot in this video, because I've watched a dozen videos on this exact topic get it wrong in a way that sets people up to be disappointed. Polished aluminum foil can reflect up to 97% of the radiant energy that hits it directly. That's a real, measurable material property. It is not the same thing as a 97% cut to your electric bill, and anyone telling you it is hasn't read the research. The Department of Energy's own building science program, the same one that studies attic performance for a living, puts the realistic result at a system-wide attic heat flow reduction of around 40%, which typically works out to somewhere between 8 and 12% off your annual cooling costs. That is a real number, a defensible number, and honestly, still a good return for what this costs. I'd rather tell you the true number now than have you feel lied to in July. So let's talk about why the reflection number and the bill number are so different, because understanding that gap is what's going to save you from wasting a Saturday. Heat moves through your house in 3 distinct ways, and your attic insulation only fights one of them well. Conduction is heat traveling through a solid material, the way a metal spoon left in hot soup gets hot at the handle. Convection is heat carried by moving air, the reason hot air collects near your ceiling and cool air sinks to the floor. Fiberglass and cellulose are genuinely good at slowing conduction. Their trapped air pockets resist that kind of heat transfer, and that resistance is the R value printed on every bag and roll you've ever bought. But radiation doesn't care about any of that. It's energy traveling as electromagnetic waves, and it passes straight through open space, straight past loosely packed fibers, until it hits something solid enough to absorb it. In your attic, that something is the top surface of your insulation. The insulation absorbs the radiant energy, heats up, and then re-releases that heat downward by conduction and convection into your ceiling, your ductwork, and eventually your living room. Your 15-inch thick pile of insulation is fighting 7 or 8% of the total problem, while the majority walks right past it. This is where a physical property called emissivity comes in, and it's the entire reason foil works when fluffy insulation doesn't. Every material has an emissivity value between 0 and 1, and it describes how efficiently that surface radiates and absorbs infrared energy. The underside of an asphalt shingle roof deck sits at roughly 0.9, meaning it radiates almost 90% of the heat it absorbs straight back down into the empty attic space below it. Polished aluminum sits at roughly 0.03 to 0.05, almost the opposite end of the scale. Put a sheet of bright aluminum foil between that hot roof deck and your insulation, oriented with the shiny side facing down into the attic, and you've replaced a surface that radiates 90% of what it absorbs with one that radiates 3 to 5%. That's the entire mechanism. Nothing exotic, nothing proprietary, just a massive difference in how two materials handle infrared energy. Now, here's the part that almost every version of this project online gets backwards. And it's the reason a lot of people who've already tried this are wondering why it didn't work. There are two places you can physically put a radiant barrier in an attic. You can staple it to the underside of the rafters up near the roof deck, shiny side facing down toward the attic floor. Or you can roll it out flat on top of your existing insulation down at floor level. Building America, the Department of Energy's own residential construction research program, is explicit about this. A solid sheet radiant barrier should not be installed flat on the attic floor, because dust settles on that horizontal surface over time and ruins it. And this isn't a minor cosmetic issue. A thin film of ordinary attic dust can push that emissivity number from 0.03 up towards 0.2 or higher, which erases most of the benefit you paid for. Up under the rafters, the foil is angled and facing straight down, so dust has nowhere to land and slide off the reflective face. On the floor, it's sitting there face up, like a table, collecting years of dust in a single humid summer. There's a second problem with floor placement that almost never gets mentioned. A solid, non-perforated sheet of foil on the attic floor acts as a vapor barrier in exactly the wrong spot. Your household generates several gallons of water vapor a day just from cooking, showering, and breathing. In a properly ventilated attic, that moisture rises and exits harmlessly through the roof vents. Trap a sheet of foil directly on top of your insulation, and that moisture has nowhere to go. It condenses against the underside of the foil and soaks into the fiberglass beneath it. Wet fiberglass can lose the majority of its insulating value, so you end up with insulation that's both blocked from doing its conductive job and now failing at it anyway. And there's a third problem, and this one connects directly to the second half of this video. A roll of foil laid out to the edges of the attic floor routinely ends up draped over the soffit vents at the eaves, the intake vents that are supposed to let outside air flow up under the roof deck. Cover those, even partially, and you've just choked off the air supply to the exact ventilation system your attic depends on. Which brings us to the part nobody wants to talk about, because a radiant barrier by itself is only half of this. A radiant barrier doesn't destroy heat, it reflects it. That heat has to go somewhere, and if your attic air isn't actually moving, it just keeps bouncing around the space, slowly warming everything else up anyway, foil included. The system that's supposed to carry that reflected heat back outside is your intake and exhaust ventilation. Cool air entering low through the soffits at the eaves, rising as it warms, and exiting high through a ridge vent or roof vents at the peak. No fan, no electricity, just basic physics doing the work, as long as both ends of that loop are actually open. Here's the part home inspectors flag more than almost anything else in an attic. The most common ventilation defect isn't a missing vent, it's a blocked one. Blown-in insulation drifts toward the eaves over the years. Batt insulation gets pushed into the rafter bays during installation to maximize coverage and ends up sealing the intake shut. Sometimes a siding contractor installs a soffit panel that looks perforated from the ground, but is actually decorative, solid wood or foam behind a cosmetic screen, and air has never once flowed through it. You end up with a ridge vent, faithfully pulling air out at the top and nothing available to replace it at the bottom, which is close to useless. Now let's do some honest math, because you'll see videos out there suggesting that a small handful of scrap metal squares, something like a few dozen pieces, roughly the size of a dinner plate, nailed up here and there, will drop your attic temperature by 50 or 60 degrees. Let's actually check that claim instead of just believing it. Say you use 90 small aluminum squares, each about 7 inches across. That's roughly 30 square feet of reflective material total. A typical American roof deck on a mid-sized single-story home runs somewhere between 1,400 and 1,700 square feet. 30 square feet against that is right around 2% coverage. A radiant barrier works in proportion to how much of the hot surface it actually covers, the same way a partly closed umbrella only keeps part of you dry. 2% coverage cannot physically produce a 50-degree swing in an entire attic. If a video promises a dramatic temperature drop from a handful of scraps, that's the math you should be running in your head before you believe it. For this to actually work, the foil needs to run continuously across the section of roof deck above the rooms you care about cooling, not scattered in symbolic patches. So here's the honest version, with honest pricing, because I'd rather under-promise and have you trust the next thing I tell you. If you've got leftover foil-faced insulation board from another project, HVAC duct wrap offcuts, or even a couple of foil emergency blankets sitting in a car kit, you can cover a meaningful section of roof deck, say the run directly above your hottest bedroom, for close to nothing. That's the honest $0 path, and it's a real one, not a marketing trick. Pair it with clearing the insulation away from your soffit bays, which is also free, and you've done the two things that actually matter without spending a cent. If you're buying material new, a 500 square foot roll of perforated radiant barrier foil currently runs right around $90 at most hardware stores and building supply sites. A typical attic roof deck takes 2 to 3 of those rolls to cover fully, so figure somewhere around $200 to $270 if you're doing the whole thing yourself with new material. That's the real number, not a rounded-down marketing number. Compare that against what the alternatives actually cost in 2026. Professional spray foam insulation for a full attic typically runs $3,000 to $8,000 installed. A full asphalt shingle roof replacement on an average home runs anywhere from around $7,000 to $24,000, depending on size and region. Add a new central air conditioner on top of an aging, overworked one, and you're looking at another $2,500 to $8,000 just for that. None of those projects are wrong to do when you actually need them. But if what you're dealing with is a hot attic pushing heat into your ceiling, you don't need any of them to get most of the benefit. Before you touch anything, here's how to check your own attic in about 2 minutes. Go up on a cool morning before the day heats up, not in the afternoon. Bring a flashlight and look along the eaves from inside the attic. If you can't see daylight or a clear gap between the roof deck and the top of your insulation at the edges, your soffit intake is probably blocked. From outside, press a hand against the perforated panels under your roof overhang. If they feel solid instead of slightly springy, or you can't feel any airflow on a breezy day, there's a real chance that venting is cosmetic. And if your attic already has a powered exhaust fan installed, be cautious with it. Field measurements on homes with blocked intake vents have consistently found these fans pulling significant volumes of already conditioned air out of the living space through every gap in the ceiling below, recessed lights, plumbing chases, the attic hatch, because the fan has nowhere else to pull air from. In a home with blocked soffits, a powered attic fan can genuinely make your cooling bill worse, not better. If none of this is something your roofer ever mentioned, that's not because anyone's hiding it from you. A roofing job is scoped and priced around the visible parts, tearing off old shingles, checking the decking, laying new material, and installing a ridge vent because code requires an exhaust point. Whether every rafter bay underneath has a clear path from the soffit to open attic space isn't part of that estimate. And checking it properly means someone climbing through your entire attic with a flashlight, which costs time nobody bid for. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a line item that fell between two trades and never landed on anyone's job description. A few safety notes before you go up there. Only step on the joists, never on the insulation between them, because there's nothing but drywall under that insulation, and people go through ceilings every year finding that out the hard way. Wear a respirator rated for fine particles and long sleeves if you're handling fiberglass. Keep foil at least 3 inches away from any recessed light fixture, unless it's rated for insulation contact, because trapping heat against an older fixture is a real fire risk. And don't staple through wiring. If you see cracked or brittle insulation on any wires up there, stop and call an electrician before you do anything else. Do the math on your own roof before you buy anything. Measure the section above the room that runs hottest, price out the rolls for just that section, and compare it to clearing your soffits for free. Most people get the bigger win from the free half of this project, not the half you pay for. If you've checked your soffits after watching this, I want to know what you found. Tell me your state and what your attic actually looked like when you got up there with a flashlight. It's the fastest way for me to figure out what to cover next.